we're breaking down a major U.S. military operation in the Middle East. The U.S. military has confirmed it has carried out multiple large-scale strikes across Syria, targeting the Islamic State militant group. These strikes were not random. They were part of a carefully planned operation launched after 3 Americans were killed in a deadly attack last month. So what happened in Syria? Why did Palmyra become the flashpoint again? Who was targeted, and what does this tell us about America's future role in the region? The U.S. Central Command says American and allied forces carried out coordinated airstrikes across multiple locations in Syria. The targets included Islamic State weapons, caches, supply routes, underground facilities, and operational hubs. These strikes are part of Operation Hawkeye strike launched in December after a deadly ambush in Palmyra. According to the U.S. military, the goal is simple: weaken ISIS's ability to plan attacks and send a clear message that attacks on American forces will be met with force. Officials emphasized that this was a response operation, not the start of a new war. Now let's go back to December 13, the day that triggered this entire operation. In Palmyra, which is in central Syria, a lone gunman opened fire during an interaction involving U.S. personnel and Syrian forces. 2 U.S. soldiers were killed along with a U.S. civilian interpreter. Washington identified the attacker as an Islamic State militant, but Syrian authorities later revealed a twist. The gunman was actually a member of Syria's own security forces, flagged earlier for extremist views and set to be dismissed. In other words, this wasn't just an external ISIS attack, it was an insider ambush, one of the most dangerous threats in modern counterterrorism. Palmyra itself is not just another Syrian city. It's home to UNESCO-listed ancient ruins and was once among the most iconic archaeological sites in the world. ISIS captured Palmyra twice during Syria's civil war, executed prisoners, and destroyed priceless monuments. Even after losing territorial control, ISIS never fully disappeared. The surrounding desert remains a perfect hiding ground, vast, remote, and poorly governed. That's why Palmyra continues to be a hotspot for ISIS activity. Operation Hawkeye strike was officially launched on December 19th, just days after Palmyra attack. Phase 1 involved a massive wave of airstrikes hitting more than 70 ISIS targets across central Syria. Follow-up missions included intelligence-driven strikes and ground operations. The operation is named Hawkeye as a tribute to the Iowa roots of the 2 U.S. soldiers killed in the attack. The naming is symbolic, personal, and deliberately forceful. This was not a U.S.-only operation. American aircraft were joined by Jordanian fighter jets, and earlier phases involved support from British and French forces. The coalition used a mix of advanced platforms, including fighter jets, gunships, and precision-guided munitions. The message is clear: ISIS is no longer a territorial state, but the global coalition against it is still active and willing to strike. U.S. Central Command also released grainy aerial footage showing jets taking off, followed by multiple explosions across rural parts of Syria. The military has not confirmed casualty numbers, but says the emphasis is on disrupting infrastructure rather than body counts. Weapons, depots, logistics, routes, and safe houses, the lifelines that allow ISIS to survive in the shadows, were the primary targets. A key point here is that ISIS today is not the same as in 2014. The group no longer controls cities or runs administrative functions, but it still exists. Small cells operate in Syria's deserts, carrying out ambushes, assassinations, and hit-and-run attacks. Their goal is survival, recruitment, and relevance. The Palmyra attack demonstrates that ISIS is still capable of striking high-value targets, which is why the U.S. describes the threat as persistent but degraded. These strikes also occur within a dramatically different Syrian landscape. Bashar al-Assad was overthrown in December 2024, and the new government is now led by President Ahmad al-Sharaa. The new leadership has pledged cooperation with international counter-terrorism efforts, and Syria has formally joined the global coalition against ISIS. This cooperation has influenced how and where these strikes were carried out. Though the country's transition remains fragile and ISIS thrives in instability. Currently, about 1,000 U.S. troops remain in Syria, supporting Operation Inherent Resolve, the international mission to defeat ISIS. The Pentagon has announced plans to reduce troop numbers and consolidate bases, but the latest attack complicates that timeline. It shows that even a reduced U.S. presence carries real risks and raises questions about how long America can step back without creating security gaps. President Donald Trump has long been skeptical of U.S. involvement in Syria. During his first term, he ordered a withdrawal of troops, but they ultimately remained. This operation reflects a familiar approach: avoid large-scale wars, but respond aggressively when Americans are attacked. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth described the strikes as a warning rather than an escalation, emphasizing that the U.S. will not forget and will not relent. Operation Hawkeye strike is ongoing. More strikes are possible, along with intelligence operations and ground missions. At the same time, Washington signals a long-term drawdown. That creates a delicate balance. Hit ISIS hard enough to prevent a resurgence, but avoid being drawn deeper into Syria's instability. For now, the U.S. message is clear. ISIS may be weakened, but attacks on Americans will bring consequences. This story isn't just about mere airstrikes. It's about how modern wars don't really end. They fade, shift, and re-emerge. ISIS lost its caliphate, but not its ideology. Syria changed governments, but not its security challenges. And the U.S. wants out, but not at any cost. So the strikes in Syria are not a new chapter. They are a reminder of an old one that never fully closed. The Islamic State is no longer front-page news, but it's still dangerous. And as long as American forces remain in the region, the risks remain real. That's all for this episode of Xplained. Stay tuned as we bring you more in-depth insights and stories that matter.